The courthouse smelled like old wood and older grudges. I sat stiff-backed on the front bench, my hands folded tightly over the round swell beneath my dress. 7 months along, and I still wasn't used to the weight of him or her pressing against my ribs. Every kick was a reminder of what I'd gained and what I'd lost. The walls were too quiet, too polite. That kind of quiet always came before something final, like a bullet chambered or a door slammed shut. I could feel their eyes on me. The folks who showed up not for justice, but for drama. The whispering women with lace gloves and thin smiles. The ranch hands pretending not to gawk, all waiting to see how the tale of Rosalind Cade ended. Pregnant, alone, and about to be freed from a man who'd walked out like the wind. No note, no goodbye. Just dust on the horizon and silence ever since. The judge hadn't called us up yet, but the paper was already on his desk. One signature from me, one from him, if he ever bothered to show, and then the last piece of my name, my pride, my marriage, would be filed away in the county records, dead and done. I glanced toward the door. Still no sign of Harlan. I didn't want him to come, not truly. Not after all this time. Not after the nights I'd screamed into my pillow, gripping the bedsheets where he once lay. Not after the slow realization that the child growing inside me might never know his father's face, or voice, or even his name. But something deeper, some stubborn ache in the bones of me, hope for the impossible. For the man I once knew to walk through that door and explain why he left. To say he'd made a mistake. To tell me I hadn't spent the last year loving a ghost. Judge Hart finally looked up over his spectacles, clearing his throat. "Mrs. Cade," he said, voice gravelly but kind. "If the other party is absent, we can proceed under abandonment terms. Are you prepared to sign today?" My fingers trembled where they rested on my belly. I opened my mouth, and then the double doors flung wide. A gust of hot wind followed him in. Dust clung to his shoulders like he'd ridden through a sandstorm. His shirt was torn at the sleeve, his boots cracked and caked with dried mud. The courtroom went quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Harlan Gage stood there, thinner than I remembered, with more shadows beneath his eyes. A scar traced his jaw I didn't recognize. But it was him, the man who kissed me under the cottonwoods, the man who whispered dreams into my neck in the dark, the man who vanished. He didn't look at the judge, didn't look at the crowd. He looked at me, and then he did something no one expected. He walked straight up the aisle, his eyes locked on mine, and dropped to his knees in front of me. The gas that rippled through the courtroom sounded like a wave hitting the rocks. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My hands went slack on my belly. He bowed his head like he was praying. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked like timber. "I didn't know," he said, "about the baby, not until last week. And I came back as soon as I heard." I stared at him, at his sunburned neck, his busted boots, his trembling hands. "You left me, Harlan," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "You didn't even write." He looked up then, and there was so much regret in his face I could almost taste it. "I thought I'd ruined us. After what happened last year, after the child we lost, I blamed myself. I thought you'd be better without me." A bitter laugh caught in my throat. "You were wrong." The judge cleared his throat again, slower this time. "Mr. Gage, do you intend to contest the divorce?" Harlan didn't look away from me. "No, sir. I came to make something right, not fight." My heart felt like it might split in two. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to reach for him. And the deepest part, the part one didn't speak of even to the stars, wanted to believe him. I didn't answer the judge. I didn't move a muscle. Because in that moment, every hurt, every hope, every unspoken word between us boiled to the surface. And I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The room didn't breathe. Not the judge. Not the townsfolk. Not even me. Harlan stayed on his knees, his hat held in shaking hands, eyes never leaving my face. He looked like a man who'd been lost in the desert and stumbled into water, unsure if it was real or just another mirage. "You came to make something right?" I asked, the words bitter as coffee left on the stove too long. "After all this time, I didn't know you were carrying," he said softly. "Didn't know there was anything left to come back for." I wanted to strike him, not out of hate, but out of how badly I had needed him. During the weeks, I couldn't rise from bed. When the nausea was so bad, I wept into my own hands. when I pressed his pillow to my chest just to smell the memory of him. That kind of pain doesn't leave clean. You should have known, I whispered. You should have stayed long enough to ask. Judge Hart's voice broke in like a porch board creaking in the quiet. Mr. Gage, this is a court of law. If you have intent to restore this union, it must be stated plainly. Harlan stood then, slowly, like he was trying not to fall apart. His eyes, that old iron gray I remembered so well, met the judge's with a steadiness that surprised even me. I didn't come to stop her if she's set on leaving me, he said, but I'll speak my truth if she'll hear it. The judge nodded once, then glanced at me. Mrs. K, it should have been simple. A yes or a no. Instead, I stood and stepped out from behind the bench. My legs felt like tree limbs in the thaw, stiff and unsure. But I walked past the onlookers through the side door the judge pointed toward and into the smaller meeting room behind the court. I didn't have to look back to know Harlan followed. The door shut behind us, and suddenly it was just the two of us again, like it used to be before life cracked wide open. We stood in silence for a long beat, the tension between us thick as tar. I leaned against the edge of the table and folded my arms. Harlan looked like he might fall apart if I said the wrong word, or the right one. Talk, I said. He nodded. After you lost the baby last year, I couldn't face it. Couldn't face you. I remember that day like a wound that never quite closed. Blood in the bedsheets. My sobs echoing off the cabin walls. And Harlan, who held me all night and was gone before dawn. You should have stayed, I said. I was scared. Not of you. Of myself. Of how much it hurt. I went south, took a job herding cattle in New Mexico. Got caught up in a raid, Comancheros. They took everything I had. Left me half dead in a ditch. I stared at him, searching his face for lies. All I found was time, worn deep into the creases of his brow, the tightness in his jaw. He looked older than the man I married, but not just in years. I sent a letter, he said, to the McIntyres. Figured they'd pass it on. They didn't, I said coldly. No one told me anything. I thought you just rode away. His shoulders sagged. I deserve that. The baby shifted a small roll under my ribs. I placed my palm there instinctively. I wasn't going to tell you, I admitted. After the first missed cycle, I told myself it couldn't be true. By the second, I hated you too much to care. His eyes softened when he looked at my hand on my stomach. Boy or girl? I don't know, I said. Didn't want the town doctor poking around unless I had to. I hope it's a girl, he said quietly, because I think she'd look like you. That shouldn't have broken me, but it did. My throat tightened, eyes burning. I built a home without you, raised livestock, kept the land from going to ruin, all while trying to forget the man I married. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just want the chance to be someone this child can count on. I looked him over again. The cracked leather belt, the stitched-up shoulder seam, the dust that hadn't been brushed off like he didn't stop to rest, not even once. You rode all this way just to say that. I rode all this way because I still love you, Rosalind. And because I finally realized love ain't just about staying when things are sweet. It's staying when everything turns to ash. My hand slipped from my belly. I haven't decided anything. You don't have to, he said. I'll be here, whether as your husband or just a man mucking out stalls if you'll let me. We stood there in the quiet of that little room. No courtroom crowd, no judge, just two broken people trying to remember how to speak each other's language. I didn't take his hand, didn't fall into his arms, but I didn't tell him to leave either. And that silence, our silence, meant something was still alive between us. The wind had picked up by the time we stepped outside. It carried dust and the scent of rain, though the sky still held its dry, faded blue. Harlan stood beside me on the courthouse steps, silent, like he didn't know whether to stay or ride off again. His hat was in his hand, his eyes on the horizon. Not because it mattered, but because he didn't know where else to look. I didn't come here to make a scene, he said finally. I know dropping to my knees like that probably felt like a trick, like some act for sympathy. It did, I answered, but it also felt like truth. He turned to me then. It was. The townsfolk had thinned out, but I could still see a few lingering under storefront awnings, pretending to be busy. I knew their type. They'd rather chew gossip than dry biscuits. Tomorrow, I'd be the story they passed along with their sewing needles and tobacco. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders. The baby kicked again, a slow drag of a heel beneath my ribs. That constant reminder, new life blooming even while everything else teetered on ruin. I wasn't sure I'd make it, Harlan said. The trail from the southern range was flooded 2 weeks ago. My horse went lame. I nearly turned back. But you didn't. He nodded. Because something in me wouldn't let go of you. Not completely. No matter how far I ran. I stared out at the dusty street. A wagon rolled past, the driver nodding once in our direction before moving on. The world hadn't stopped for our heartache. It never did. I used to lie awake wondering where you were, I said. What kind of dirt your boots were stepping through. If you'd found another woman's porch to sit on. He winced. There wasn't anyone else. I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because there was a quiet in his voice that couldn't be faked. Regret heavy as iron. I thought you'd hate me, he added. After the miscarriage, I saw the way you looked at me. Like I'd brought it on. I never hated you, I said. I hated the silence. The way you left me with all that grief and nothing to carry it in but my own chest. I thought I was protecting you, he said softly. But truth is, I was protecting myself. I didn't know how to be strong for you when I was barely holding myself together. I turned toward him then, searching his face for the man I married. He was still there, under the dirt and wear. Older now, wiser maybe, certainly more broken. But I wasn't the same girl who'd taken his name either. Life had carved new lines into both of us. We can't go back, I said, to who we were. I don't want to, he said. I just want to start from where we are. That hit me harder than anything else. You know, the child may never know who you used to be, I said, my voice quieter now. But they'll know who you are now, if you stay. I intend to, he said, without hesitation. For a moment, I let that sit in the space between us. A promise unwrapped, but not yet worn. We still have to speak with Judge Hart, I reminded him. He won't keep that docket open forever. Whatever you decide, Harlan said, I'll stand by it. Even if that means I walk away today and never set foot near you again. I stepped down from the last stair, onto the sun-bleached boards of the walk. The wind caught the edge of my skirt, fluttering it around my boots. I turned back, looking up at him. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said. Not completely. I wouldn't trust you if you were, he replied. And I don't know what kind of father you'll be. I don't either, he said, but I'd like to find out. He joined me on the walk, slower now, more careful with his steps, as though each word we shared had left a mark on the ground beneath him. We'll talk to the judge, I said, not as husband and wife, just as two people trying to figure out what comes next. His smile was faint, barely there. That's enough for me. We walked side by side, past the windows of the mercantile, the shuttered blacksmith shop, the old livery stable that hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in years. The town was small, but suddenly it felt bigger than it used to, like something had cracked open between us, letting the future in. Maybe not a clean slate, but a page not yet written. We reached the courthouse door again, neither of us reaching for it right away. There was a weight to the next steps, like whatever came next would define not just us, but the child who hadn't yet taken their first breath. You sure you want to be in that room again? I asked. I'm sure I don't want to be anywhere else. I opened the door, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The courtroom was nearly empty when we returned. Judge Hart sat behind a bench, glasses perched on the end of his nose, fingers steepled like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than we had. He looked up as we stepped inside, his gaze steady but not unkind. You two sort things out? He asked, voice low-measured. I nodded. We spoke. Harlan stood beside me, hands at his sides, calm in a way I hadn't seen before. Not the restless calm of a man with nowhere to go, but the quiet of someone who'd made peace with staying. The judge gestured toward the table where the divorce papers still sat. The ink on my name had dried. His signature line remained blank. I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of your past, Judge Hart said. That's not my place. But I can tell when two people have come through fire and still want to stand side by side. I glanced at Harlan, then down at the paper. I remembered the night I'd signed it. Alone in the cabin, the lamp flickering while the wind moaned through the walls. I'd signed it not because I wanted freedom, but because I thought I had no choice. Because I believed the man I married had vanished into the dust. But here he was, real and ragged and breathing, with eyes full of regret and hope tangled together. "I don't want to sign the second page," I said. The judge raised a brow. "Is that your final decision, Mrs. Cade?" "It is." He leaned back his chair, thoughtful. "Then this court will consider the divorce petition withdrawn, pending formal request." You understand what that means. I did. It meant there'd be no clean break, no erasing what we were. It meant the hard work would begin outside this room, day by day, in small, imperfect ways. "Yes," I said. "I understand." Harlan hadn't spoken, but I felt the tension ease in his shoulders, like he'd been bracing for another goodbye. The judge reached for the papers, stacked them neatly, then set them aside. "Then this court session is adjourned." He gave us a brief nod and rose, his robes catching the light as he moved toward his chambers. We were left in the stillness again, but this time it didn't feel empty. Harlan turned to me. "I don't know how to make it all right." "You won't," I said. "Not at once." "I'll start small," he said. "With the barn roof, maybe. It's probably still leaking." I smiled despite myself. Still, it never stopped. "I'll fix it." We walked out into the fading afternoon together, down the courthouse steps and onto the street where the world carried on. A woman pushed a wheelbarrow full of kindling. A young boy raced past with a dog barking at his heels. No one looked twice at us now. The drama had passed. To them, it was over. But I knew better. When we reached the wagon, Harlan helped me up without a word. His hands were careful, like he knew what it meant to touch me now, like he didn't take it for granted. Once seated, I rested my hands on my belly and looked out across the town. The same dusty storefronts, the same dry wind, but something felt different. "You think we can do this?" I asked softly. "I think we already started." He climbed up beside me, took the reins in hand, and flicked them gently. The horse pulled us forward, slow at first, then steady. We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the rhythm of hooves and the rattle of the wheels. Ahead, the road split, one path toward the hills, the other toward the homestead we once built together. He glanced at me. I nodded toward home, and for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what we'd lost. I was thinking about what we might still build.